Hi, Brian Beneduce coming to you again. I had a meeting in one of my brand new offices, and years ago, this was one of my most panic stricken places to be. It's called the conference room. Um, and we had about 30 people here, and we had a nice meeting today, and it ended a little while ago. And I want to read a chapter, but the chapters now, I used to call them powerful, and they are very powerful. But you've learned a lot about me. We're moving up towards what I call my healing thought process. This is a pretty long chapter. I might not even talk after it because it's a very intense chapter. And as they say, enough said, there's a lot here. So let's get right to it. Chapter 16, the test. The limits I am setting become the prison I am living. Anonymous. I was at the point in my life where business was getting better despite myself. I had clients, I had vendors, I had cash flow, but I still had severe anxiety and panic attacks, an undying and growing urge to never leave my house ever again. The success wasn't helping my condition. It's funny, the more success I experienced, the more that little voice in my head kept saying, "You're making 5 to 10 more money than you ever made in your life as a mechanic. Rest, take a break, sit on your laurels. You don't have to do this anymore." But then there was that other voice. There's a scene in the movie Rocky where Rocky is lying on a bed talking to his young son. His son asks if he ever feels fear when he fights one of those big monster like guys. "Yeah, I do," Rocky answers in that deep, throaty Stallone voice. But then there's that other voice in my head that says, I can take the punishment. I can take the fight. I can take the hits, and I can keep going. Today I am 55 years old, and I have built a multi-million-dollar corporation. And I am proud to say there are many people and characters that have provided inspiration to my life. Many people look to teachers for their inspiration, and some people draw off the wisdom of poets. I tend to draw my inspiration from people I would like to associate with. Although many of these people are technically fictional characters, I know it helps me and inspires me because I can relate to the message. I can relate to characters like Rocky, and I enjoy all the Rocky movies, some more than others, I suppose, but I don't claim to be a movie critic. I feel inspiration in his words, because as much as I want to rest on my laurels, and I say that I've accumulated enough money that I can now spend the rest of my life pretending, I can't pretend to be normal and just sweep the anxiety and panic under the carpet. But then another part of me says, screw that, I've come this far with all the drama, and I've overcome incredible obstacles along the way. I'll do what I want. This brand of panic and fear never sleeps, and yet through it all, I was compelled to keep going. I had to. Not just for me, for the sake of my wife and my kids. How could I let them believe the lie I had become? And what would I do later if the business started to falter like my father's did, and if I lost a customer, or two, or three? I saw what happened to my parents when everything was taken away from them. I lived it right along with them. That particular fear always follows me and has helped fertilize the roots of my anxiety tree, helping it drill deeper. In the back of my mind, there's nothing there to stop it except my own will and my buddy Danny's voice yelling at me, insisting I keep fighting. In the wreckage that was my dad's company, my fight or flight response kicked into overdrive. But then there was nowhere to go, nowhere to flee. I had no choice but to fight, and I'm glad God granted me that fight or flight choice. I suppose the flight option was there in some form, but it helped me realize how nervous, anxious, scared, and terrified I really was, and I hated that side of me. As my kids grew up, I used the analogy of a backpack to teach the life lessons I've learned from my own life. I tell them, put it in your backpack because you never know when you're going to need it. Feel the fear and do it anyway, and keep on doing it. That's the key. Keep on doing it, and the fear will slowly subside, become less and less, become easier to deal with. In essence, keep fighting, and that's what I did. As I started to become financially successful, one of the first things I splurged on was a small boat. It was a 20-foot center console powerboat, and I kept it docked in a scenic harbor on the south coast of Rhode Island. I loved the name that was already on the boat, so I kept it. Dreamcatcher. Ironically, I bought it at a discount from someone who was going through a nasty divorce and had placed an ad in the paper. But his bad fortune had become my good fortune, and now it was mine. And it instantly became my fort on the water. and I intended to use it just like the fort I would hide in during my childhood back in Canaan. In fact, back in those days, we even owned an 18-foot aluminum boat powered by a 150 horsepower Mercury outboard motor. We used it to go water skiing on Twin Lakes. Those were some of the most fun days I can remember. Being out on the lake with my dad, my brother, and sometimes my cousins, skiing, fishing, and just having a great time. We'd stay in a cabin owned by a friend of my father's, and it was as safe, as comforting as a place I've ever known. Looking back, I think those good times shaped my affection for the water and how I relate to it as a safe place to be. Buying the Dreamcatcher was a turning point in my life. I was drawn to it, and I viewed it as an opportunity and a tool to help me try and act normal. I figured if I could pretend to be normal, my abnormal feelings would slowly and surely subside. I remember paying for the boat, putting it in a slip, and going over all the details with the seller. It was a Friday, and I was a bit more relaxed than usual, as I knew I was looking ahead to 3 days of freedom, to play with my new fort on the water, before I had to suck it up and start my anxiety-ridden panic work week. I pretended I knew a lot more than I did about the craft and boating in general, and the seller eventually said goodbye and left me standing alone in the cockpit. Like many states, Rhode Island doesn't require you to have a boater's license, so I looked out across the dock past the marina, untied all 3 lines, and started the engines. Slowly but surely I had made my way out of the dock and through the guide buoys. I had been on many boats before, so I figured I knew what I should be doing. The cove was located in a fairly laid-back neighborhood populated by mostly fishermen, who were more concerned with their own problems, so no one really cared to pay attention to me. The water was so calm, so I kept at an idle speed, nice and low. I steered with one hand, and while holding a beer with my other, waved and smiled at other boats passing me on my left. My anxiety level dropped from a 3 to a 1. I felt like I had been doing this my entire life. It was natural. I believed I was meant to be here. As I passed through the breakwater of the rocky inlet of the marina, I found myself on a body of water known as Block Island Sound. I looked to my left and to my right, and I could see nothing but dark blue ocean clear to the horizon. The water was no longer calm as it was in the cove, and 2 or 3 foot waves now slapped against the side of the vessel, causing it to rock a bit. I then realized I was completely alone. Anxiety level 3, 4, anxiety level 5. So why weren't there any other boats around? I had expected to scan the sea and see 40 or maybe 50 other pleasure crafts enjoying the morning. I had temporarily forgotten it was Friday, and most folks were still at work. I started to seriously worry that I had been too cocky, and that I shouldn't have pretended I knew what I was doing, and probably shouldn't have been pretending I was normal in the first place. The what-ifs were preparing themselves to attack me from all angles. Despite the anxiety that was building in my mind, I pushed forward and headed out into the open water. I could have turned back, but subconsciously I now know, I was testing myself. I was trying to learn how much I could take. I motored along cautiously for about a mile, then looked back and I saw an ominous bank of fog about to roll in. I hadn't told anyone I would be out there today. Panic kicked in like the start of a speedboat's engine. My anxiety level spiked to a 9. What if the engine quits? What if I have to swim for shore? What if? Damn it. I felt my throat start to close and my heart began to race 1,000 miles per hour. I scrambled around the boat on all fours looking for a bag to hyperventilate into. There wasn't anything. I wasn't angry. I was angry I didn't think to bring one along with me. I found enough inner strength to slowly turn the boat around and head back to the marina. I could think of nothing except getting past the rocky entrance of the breakwall and back into safety. As I entered the cove, I tried to convince myself that the water was too rough out there anyway. Turning back had to be the right thing to do. I quickly found my slip, retied the boat to the dock. Then I went about washing it down as if I had been out on a 3-day cruise. Smiling and waving to anyone who might walk by, trying to make it look like I was a savvy veteran boater with decades of experience, I was faking it. Just like I did in my car, on the road, and basically everywhere. But as I stood there portraying the character, I thought about what lie I would tell Robbie when I got home. It was a blast. I cruised all the way around Block Island, circled around it, came all the way back. It was great. I loved every minute of it. Did I expect the ocean water to wash away over 20 years of anxiety and panic I had experienced on land? Did I expect to see hospital signs and posted on buoys out there and EMTs floating by standing ready to assist me? I recognized my ego, the fight, and my stupidity all rolled into one moment. The depression was numbing. And that's another branch in the anxiety tree I haven't discussed very much at all to this point. Depression. Depression can't really be called true emotion because it wraps itself around so many of the others. It depressed me to know that I have achieved so much in my life, yet I still didn't have the one thing I really wanted, peace of mind. Not to get off course here, pardon the pun, but there's a song by the band Boston called Peace of Mind that sums up my feelings on this, and it was a song I would play and sing to myself all the time. Music, akin to the movies Rocky, like Rocky, also plays a major role in my motivation. I will not sing. Now everybody's got advice they just keep on giving. Doesn't mean too much to me. Lots of people out there make believe in their living. Can't decide who they should be. I understand about indecision, but I don't care if I get behind. People living in competition, all I want is to have my peace of mind. Music has always helped me fight off bouts of depression. I never considered myself a true musician, but back in high school I did play the trumpet in symphonic and jazz bands, and I was pretty good at it too. I hated reading music and discovered I could usually pick up something and play it after hearing it only 2 or 3 times. But it was the drums I liked more than anything, and to this day I still have a drum kit set up in my basement where I can make noise. I grab a few beers, head downstairs and play, make believing there's 10,000 screaming fans dancing in front of me. Peace of Mind is a great song. All about a guy trying to live out his life and really doesn't want anything except peace of mind. So why can't I have both? Why can't I have a wonderful family, successful business, and have peace of mind too? It wasn't like I was doing anything illegal or immoral. I was just trying to live out my life the way everyone else did. My depression worsened and added to my anxiety. Instead of looking to my boat as an escape and fun and pleasure, I looked to it as a source of depression. Yet another necessary evil that I had to fight to overcome. If the business had not been going strong at that point, I wonder if that would have been the end of me. To endure, I started to view myself like a diabetic. I had a thing that I just had to live with and get used to because it was going to be this way for the rest of my life. Every boat trip I took sucked. I started to believe that I was never going to enjoy something again. I would have to go through at least a level 8 panic attack. That was my thing. It's what I was. The more I thought about it, the more depression gripped me. But I still went out, played some racquetball from time to time, went to parties with my wife, and through it all, I was fighting. I found myself in the gym more often too, lifting weights. I would take the family out for breakfast, take our dog to the field, throw the ball around, push my kids on the swing set, then take everyone to the local pool, splash around. I would act like I was normal. It was a fun day, while all the while, deep down, I was focused entirely on the thing. That anxiety tree was growing, and I just could not get rid of it. I would make excuses every chance I got to skip another boat trip. And when the excuses ran out, I'd take the boat out only as far as the breakwater, then quickly bring it back to safety, back to the dock. One afternoon, to take the edge off the anxiety, I downed 7 or 8 cans of beer before I climbed into the boat. As I headed for the breakwater, I noticed a 40-foot yacht up ahead of me, and I followed him from the southern Rhode Island coast halfway to Block Island, about 6 miles altogether of open ocean traveling. That's when I decided I couldn't handle it anymore, and I'd better turn back. As I approached the safety of the marina, my eyes welled up with tears. This was no accomplishment. It was fake, beer muscles, and I knew I wasn't afraid of the boat or the ocean at all. I was afraid of being alone. A terrible realization, and knowing that depressed me further. But I was obsessed with fighting it. I went back out a few days later, this time sober. It was early in the morning, and my anxiety level was at a 7, even before I set foot on the dock. I had been obsessing about the trip all night. The weather was warm, the sun was shining, and the wind was dead calm. It was better conditions than anyone could ever hope for. On the evening before, I bragged to everyone about how great my day on the water was going to be and about how I couldn't wait to get out there. Yet deep down, I was praying that it would rain and give me yet another lame excuse to have to stay home. So that morning, I played the theme from Rocky, shouted out myself in the mirror, and used every self-motivational technique any testosterone-filled maniac would ever use to get going. My heart was pounding at 200 beats per minute. Yet I kept pushing myself and took the boat deeper and deeper out into the calm, majestic waters of Block Island Sound. I had decided that on this voyage I would test myself and take myself to the very edge and accept that, this time, I might not be able to return. Just like with the ski lift and with the elevator, it's the what if. I wanted to know. I wanted to feel level 10, even though at that point I didn't yet realize level 10 was unreachable. But I didn't care. I had to find out. I thought about the money I spent on the boat, my employees who relied on me at the office, and most of all, my family who loved me. I had to get over this. But more importantly than that, I had to understand this thing. I took a deep breath and looked down at the ignition key. I was about to cut the engine and create my own level 10. The engine was humming in a soothing rhythm. I thought of Rocky talking to his son. How could I do this? What's the worst that could happen? What if I can't restart the boat? What if the motor just turns over and over and over again? It was time to find out what level 10 was all about and be alone with my darkest, deepest fear. It was time to be stuck in that tunnel or on top of that bridge or in an elevator or to have a full-fledged panic attack in front of those 20 customers in a conference room. You might be thinking to yourself, what's the big deal? Just turn the boat off and on and it'll be done with it. But for someone with this level of agoraphobia, being 5 miles offshore alone with no means of assistance is comparable to being stuck alone in a prison cell or trapped behind enemy lines. My hands still shake as I recount the story even today. It's carved itself into my mind as a permanent memory. I turned the key and the engine went silent. I could hear nothing but the sound of the waves gently lapping at the side of the vessel. In the distance, I could see one fishing boat, probably 20 miles away, and it was unlikely he could see me at all. I remember admiring the fisherman's resolve and jealous that he could just go out anywhere he wanted. No bad thoughts, no fears, no worries, no what-ifs, just go. I remember the smell of the sea, of the oily exhaust from the boat, everything about that day. I did have a radio on board, but I knew it would take the Coast Guard at least an hour to find me, and by then I would have either hyperventilated myself to death or pounded my head into the hull of the boat until I was a bloody dead mess. I turned the key and it took 8 to 10 seconds for the engine to come back to life. I was so happy and relieved, I cried. I thought about trying it again, but instantly created a list of 22 excuses why I shouldn't. But it didn't matter. It was done. I had done it. It was time to move on. For the next 2.5 hours, I was normal. I brought the boat back to the dock with my head held high, my chest pumped out a little further than usual. I hopped off and started up random conversations with a couple of guys nearby. We talked and we laughed about boating for over an hour. It felt great to be normal. There's one funny thing I'd like to share here. I find it hilarious that there are people who are terrified to do many of the things I do all the time, like selling to a new customer, powerlifting, or even putting their boat back into a slip. People with my condition never fear the actual acts themselves. I was born to sell, and wonder what I would have accomplished had I not been so panic-stricken. I wonder what competitions I might have won powerlifting without this affliction. And believe it or not, just the act of docking a boat poorly in front of other enthusiasts gives some boaters fits. I remember having a conversation and asking why anyone would buy a boat if they were afraid to dock it. Shit, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. But this boat was my last straw. After this episode, I knew without a shadow of a doubt I was doing this all wrong. I couldn't go through life constantly fighting like this anymore. If I did, I knew I never lived to see my 40th birthday. Had I really just bought a $40,000 boat to test my anxiety? Or was I testing my manhood? Or my fear? Am I the only guy to buy a boat just to see how far they could go offshore before they died of a heart attack? Didn't other people buy boats because they wanted peace of mind and relaxation? To be one with the earth? To be Zen-like? On the drive home, I thought about all these things and cried some more. But despite the depression, the moment proved to be a turning point in my life. It showed that beyond a shadow of a doubt, I would not die from this. I couldn't. And it also showed me that perhaps something else was going on inside my head that I hadn't yet considered. I had to be smarter. I had to delve further. And I had to continue to test myself until I won it. And if I didn't win it, I pledged to test myself until I did. Maybe that was why God gave me the opportunity to own this boat in the first place. This story is significant, too, for sending me into another hobby, reading. I had to find the missing piece and turn to books. I read until I couldn't read anymore. I read while on sales calls. I read in the bathtub. I read on vacation. I just kept reading. Most of the books I read were about anxiety, nervousness, or Zen. And the advice they offered worked great until I put the book away and had to go back to face life I was leading. In the movie Shawshank Redemption, a prisoner who has spent his entire life behind bars finally receives his freedom. The narrator remarks with one of the most famous quotes in the film history. He had to get busy living or get busy dying. And sadly, the character chooses to take his own life. A few scenes later, Morgan Freeman's character is faced with the same decision. Yet he approaches the problem differently. He elects to hop on a bus, head for the ocean, where he intends to live out the rest of his life in peace. Fight or flight, fight or flight. It's a shame there isn't more gray area. And that was my biggest mistake. Just because I wasn't able to do it did not mean I couldn't. It meant I was doing it wrong. It meant I needed to keep testing. Damn boat. 21 minutes, 56 seconds. I'm reading in a very interesting place. I just noticed as I look at my video, I have my company behind me, one of my posters that sits in one of my rooms. Very intense. That's 7 boats ago, 8 boats ago. It's intense because it's the beginning of the realization of the healing thought process. I'm not going to get into it too much because I really don't need to. There's a lot there. That's an interesting, it brings back a lot of memories. Sadly, a lot of fearful memories. I'll just tell you this hopefully within a minute, 22 minutes I'm at. In the next coming, I'm going to finish this book by the end of October. So let's see how many chapters I can get done. But in the next coming weeks, months, you'll be hopefully seeing an introductionary, how am I saying that word? Promotional video. Thank you very much. You're going to be seeing a promotional video. And it's going to be about what I'm going to be, my talks going further, as well as opening up my Center for Anxiety, Panic, and Hope. And I'm ready to roll. I've had many talks under my belt. All the questions have been answered to a point, and I'm ready to start. So look for the promotional video. I apologize. This chapter really hit me in the old gutteroony, so I apologize for being overly emotional with this chapter. So, having said that, it's time to go to my boat and go sit on the October water and just relax and all that good stuff. So, have a great day. Thank you very much for being here, and look for the next chapter. Take care.